You don't belong here. Economy is in the back.
Odessa train didn't move. 79 years old. Pearl earrings. Warm brown shawl. One hand gripping the seat in front of her, like the ground might shift if she let go. The man in seat 3A hadn't looked at her ticket. He had looked at her shawl, her bag, her age, and decided David Wexler, charcoal suit, the kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because he never has to. He pressed the call button. "Excuse me," he said calmly to the flight attendant. "I think she's in the wrong seat." Odessa already had her documents out. Boarding pass, printed confirmation, ID, all placed carefully on the tray table. "Seat 3A, she said quietly. The flight attendant glanced at them. Everything matched. "Still, ma'am, do you have a connecting flight today?" "Yes." "Would you be more comfortable further back?" Odessa blinked once. Her hands tightened on the armrest. Not anger. Something older than that. Her knees, replaced 2 years ago, were beginning to shake. She steadied herself. "I am in my seat," she said. David leaned back, relaxed, certain, like the outcome had already been decided. For a moment, no one else in the cabin moved. Then the lavatory door clicked open. But what no one in that cabin expected was who would step into the aisle next. Small Shoes stepped into the aisle. She stopped beside Odessa, looked at the documents on the tray, then at the man in 3A. Laura reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper, the second boarding pass. She held it out to the flight attendant. "Her seat is 3A. No hesitation, no raised voice, just clear." Then she turned, pointed directly at David. "Get up." A few passengers shifted in their seats. David let out a quiet laugh. "Sweetheart," he said, "the adults are handling this." Laura didn't move. "She's been sitting here since before you boarded." The flight attendant hesitated. Lara's eyes shifted to her. "Did you check his ticket?" Silence. Not hers. His. The question sat there. Heavy. Unavoidable. For the first time, the flight attendant turned to David. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" A pause. Small, but long enough. He reached into his jacket and handed it over. She looked down, then froze. Seat 3B, not 3A. The air in the cabin changed. No one spoke. David didn't say anything, didn't explain, didn't argue, because there was nothing to argue. He had never been in the right seat, not for a second, because the moment the truth came out, something in the cabin changed again. No one reacted right away. That was the worst part. The silence didn't break. It settled. David shifted first. A small movement. He reached for his bag, stood, and stepped into 3B without a word. Smoothed his jacket like nothing had happened. Opened his laptop. Looked at the screen. Didn't type. Didn't look at Odessa. Not once. Around him, people avoided eye contact. The man across the aisle stared out the window. A woman in the row ahead adjusted her seatbelt twice. The flight attendant turned toward the galley, like it was over, like it could be left there. "Excuse me." The voice came from row 2. Calm, even, impossible to ignore. The flight attendant stopped, turned back. The woman in 2B didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I watched the entire exchange. She folded her hands in her lap. From the moment he spoke to you to the moment you asked her those questions. A beat that shouldn't be left as it is. The cabin shifted again. This time, people looked up. The man in 4A leaned forward slightly. "I saw it too," he said. She showed her ticket immediately. Another voice, closer to the window. She answered everything you asked. The words came one at a time. Careful, measured, but they didn't stop. Each one made the next easier. The flight attendant stood still now, listening. No clipboard, no smile, just listening. At the back of the aisle, a second crew member appeared. Then another. Someone had already called it in. What happened next changed who had control of the cabin. The supervisor arrived with a tablet in her hand. She didn't rush, didn't apologize immediately. She looked at Odessa first, then at the documents still resting on the tray table, then at the flight attendant. Walk me through what happened. No one interrupted. The explanation came in pieces. Careful, incomplete. The supervisor listened without reacting. Then she looked down at her tablet, scrolled, stopped. Her expression changed, just slightly. She read something again, slower this time. Then she spoke. "Sir," she said, turning to David, "you were offered an upgrade to 3A at the gate today." David didn't look up. "You declined it." A pause. "You selected 3B. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Everyone heard them. The supervisor lifted her eyes. "When you boarded, you were already assigned to 3B. Stillness. Complete. Total." She turned back to the flight attendant. "Did you verify his seat before questioning hers?" No answer. Not immediately. That was answer enough. The supervisor nodded once. Then she stepped closer to Odessa. Her voice changed. Not louder, just human. "Ma'am, your seat is 3A. A small pause. "It has always been 3A. Another breath. "I'm sorry this was ever questioned." Odessa looked at her, long enough to decide something. Then she nodded once. "A glass of water would be fine." "I'll bring it myself," the supervisor said. And she did. No one spoke while she walked away. The supervisor closed the tablet, and the silence said everything. The cabin was quiet now. Not the tense kind of quiet anymore. The settled kind. Laura leaned against Odessa's arm as the plane moved smoothly through the night sky. Far below, scattered lights stretched across the darkness. Odessa looked at her and stayed silent for a moment longer than usual. Then her eyes softened, and her thoughts went somewhere else. She remembered the first time she saw her. A small child, 4 years old, wrapped in a thin blanket at the edge of a social home. No name that anyone claimed. No one coming back for her. Just waiting. Odessa didn't ask questions back then. She simply picked her up. No ceremony. No paperwork that felt like it mattered. No permission from anyone who thought they had the right to give it. Just a decision. A quiet one. And from that day on, Laura followed her everywhere. Not just growing up beside her, but watching her give everything she had to children in the world, had already decided not to notice. And somewhere along the way, Laura didn't just learn kindness. She learned what it costs, what it requires when the moment finally comes. Laura shifted slightly beside her. "Where did you learn to ask about his ticket?" Odessa asked quietly. Laura didn't even think about it. "From you." A pause. "You always say, when someone accuses you of something, make them show proof first." Odessa let out a small breath. "I say that about homework." Laura shrugged. "Same principle." That did it. Odessa laughed. Not the polite kind. The real one. The kind she had been holding in for too long. Laura laughed too. And for a few minutes, at 30,000 feet over Tennessee, there was no first class, no conflict, no tension. Just them, a grandmother and the child she chose. Exactly where they were always meant to be. When the plane landed, the noise returned. Seatbelts clicked. Bags moved. People stood up like nothing had happened. But something had. At the gate, Renata was waiting. She saw her mother first. Pearl earrings, worn shawl, canvas bag in hand. Then Laura behind her, still holding that folded boarding pass like it mattered more now than when it was printed. Renata knew immediately. Not the details, just the feeling. The kind only daughters recognize. She would hear everything later. But in that moment, she didn't ask. She just looked at her mother, standing there, steady, present, unmoved, like a woman who had never once in her life needed permission to take up space, and never would. Sometimes, it only takes one person to ask the right question. If you were there, would you have spoken up? If this story stayed with you, subscribe for more stories that remind us what courage and dignity look like. And if it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to see it today.